We begin in Georgia, which has been thrown into political turmoil after the pro-Russian Georgian Dream party was declared the winner of Saturday's election. Georgia's president, who's not part of the ruling party, has announced that she will not accept the results. Surrounded by members of the main opposition parties, President Salome Zourabichvili said the country had been the victim of a Russian special operation. She said there'd been a total falsification of the election and called on the people of Georgia to take to the streets to protest. The opposition is also refusing to accept the outcome. Oliver Reisner is professor in European and Caucasian Studies at the Ilia State University in Tbilisi, and he joins us now. Good to have you on the program. As we've heard, President Zourabichvili says she will not recognize the results. What impact do you expect her objection to have?
It will be another confrontation as we had 4 years ago, where there was a much smaller reason for challenging the results of the elections, parliamentary elections. We can say that the Georgian Dream, the ruling party, prepared very well for this day and made a specific announcement that could already be read as a preparation of securing their victory. In short, we can say that really the Georgian Dream finished the Georgians' dream of a membership in the European Union.
Interesting. The opposition claiming that Russia meddled in the process. How credible are those claims?
This is what has to be seen. So this, of course, is not something that is openly demonstrated, I think. What, of course, is quite surprising are always the very positive statements by the Russian authorities about the plans, about the announcement of Georgian Dreams. This is why opposition also calls them Russian Dream.
Interesting. Just as you put it there, some international observers say this was an election that hinged on a choice between leaning towards Russia and a path towards the EU. And you saying that the EU dream is pretty much dead at this moment. But was this issue of the EU and Russia really the most important thing for Georgians as they were going to the polls?
The point is that we have in Georgia a large part of the population that lives around the poverty line, and they are very much dependent on state jobs. And the Georgian Dream, as the ruling party for the last 12 years, intensively used what is called administrative resources, really, to push their staff in the local administration, teachers and so on, really in complying, in voting for the Georgian Dream. There are other mechanisms that are already well established in the post-Soviet area, also in Georgia. And this is something what wonders me is really that the opposition, like United National Movement, really did not do anything to prepare for this situation. They publicly claimed that really they will win and did not prepare for the worst case, really, that these results can be manipulated.
What could they have done?
The Georgian Dream has, as I mentioned, so the administrative resources, then really having a very polarizing election campaign that really aligns the opposition with what they call the global party of war, where a lot, especially elderly people and in the regions, were very afraid of having another war. And these were very, very disgusting campaign posters that were disseminated all over the country with pictures about destroyed heritage in Ukraine. And then we do not want war, we want peace. So that the Georgian Dream, not in a European-style democratic competition, but really that they want to be the sole political party and authority in the country.
DW correspondent Maria Katamadze joins us now from Tbilisi. Maria, the opposition is crying foul. They're claiming there was widespread voter manipulation. What are you hearing?
Well, it's important to look at the local and international observers' reports. Now, the local independent election watchdog said that the violations that they registered on the election day significantly impacted the results of the election. That was the quote from the independent election watchdog. They said that the violations included vote bribing, pressure on public workers, pre-colored ballots. Now, if we look at the International Observation Mission, we had a chance to put a question to the OSCE the observation mission, and I asked them, would they agree with this assessment of the local colleagues? And the answer was, so 6% of pressure and intimidation cases and 24% of cases of voter secrecy being compromised, which is high. That was the answer from the delegation. One of the delegation members also pointed out that the cameras that were installed at the polling stations created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation, and as if the Big Brother was watching you.
And some have framed this vote describing it as a choice between a sort of pro-European future for Georgia or closer relations with Russia. Is this what drove most Georgians to the voting booth?
Yes, it seems like it did. At least voters who voted oppositional. If we look at the Georgian party's sort of pre-election and election rhetoric, they framed it differently. They said that it's a choice between war and peace with Russia. Now, Georgia fought a war with Russia in 2008, and two breakaway republics of South Ossetia and Abkhazia are occupied by Russian forces. And we traveled to the occupation line earlier this month, and we could see that definitely there is a fear of another war with Russia, and it seems like the ruling party was very sort of smart to utilize those fears in these elections and to looks like secure the victory using these narratives.
So officially a defeat for the Georgian opposition. Where does this leave them? Where do they go from here?
Now, from what we see from the opposition, they declared these elections rigged for all four oppositional sort of forces. Two of them, two coalitions, said that they will not enter the parliament. They said that it's, in their view, illegitimate parliament. They seem very sort of paralyzed and very surprised by the results that were announced. And still we are waiting for their action plan that they promise to deliver very soon. They also called for the protest. However, nothing is scheduled as of now. We are expecting also the pro-Western president, Salome Zourabichvili, to make this statement, and then we're going to sort of see what is the next steps that the opposition will be taking.
Right, so let's go to Tbilisi now and talk to Katya, Andrusz, a spokesperson for the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, ODHR. Hello, Katya. Thanks for joining us. As we saw in that report, the opposition is claiming that there were attempts to stuff ballot boxes and intimidate some voters. What did your organization observe?
Yeah, if I could just go back one step very briefly to say what we do and we don't do and what the observation does. So all 57 states of the OSCE, which includes Georgia, have committed to inviting us to observe their elections in recognition that neutral observation can help the election process, not for me and not for you and not for the people in power, but for the people of the country. So that's what we're doing here. We use the same methodology everywhere. I'll be going from Georgia to the US, and we're using exactly the same methodology. What we don't do is say whether an election is legitimate or not. That's for the people of the country to be doing. So just to say that right. We were here to observe. And so, yeah, what did we find? Well, we've been on the ground here since the 10th of September, so we've had plenty of time to look at the run-up to the election, which is absolutely vital, because for us, it's important to understand that an election is much more than election day. So we were looking at the legal framework, voter registration, candidate registration, the tone of the campaign, where we saw a lot of difficulties, deep polarization in the country. And altogether, we've had 380 observers around the country. The entire international election observation had almost 530, so we could observe in around 2,000 polling stations around the country.
Okay. So in terms of what you observed, just sorry to cut you there. In terms of what you observed, were these isolated incidents that we've talked about earlier, or was it part of a larger campaign?
Yeah, so if we're talking about election day, what you were showing just now with the ballot stuffing, this kind of egregious violation is something that was very isolated as far as we could see from our observations. We saw that the election day was well run from an organizational point of view. But it took place in a very tense atmosphere that grew more tense as time went on. There were many reports of intimidation of voters, and we found that in a large number of polling stations, the secrecy of the vote, which is core to democratic elections, was not guaranteed. Going back to the elections generally, what we found as the observer mission, we found that the voters were offered a large range of choices, but the elections were marred, tarnished by a number of issues, and one of them was reports of pressure on voters,
right.
Particularly some groups of voters and a number of other issues.
Again, based on observations talking about, the different groups, do we know if these so-called attempts at sabotage were directed only against the opposition or also against the Georgian Dream party? Was it one-sided or not?
It's certainly true to say that the polarization in Georgia is entrenched, and that's on all sides. There's a high degree of polarization. If we're talking about advantages, we did see what we call an undue advantage of incumbency, which basically means those in power using their power to stay in power, and this we certainly saw on the side of the ruling party.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean exactly by that? Is that then to say that those in power found ways to manipulate the election and then the opposition did not, based on your observation?
So I'm not talking about, I wouldn't use the word manipulation here, but for example, an advantage of incumbency can be where there are high-level officials at national and at local level, where we saw them campaigning when they were in the course of their ordinary duties. And this is blurring the line between state and party. And this is not in line with international democratic standards. The ruling party also had a vast financial advantage that they made use of. One of the other main things that we found and that's important to mention is the law that was passed earlier this year on the controversial law on the transparency of foreign influence, which has had a negative impact on the work of civil society. And this is something that we saw coming into play in the campaign and the lead up to the election.
Right. Let me get your thoughts on this. I mean, the opposition has called it stolen elections, right? The opposition, again, is calling on EU members not to recognize today's voting results. Would that be a fair response in your opinion?
Oh, you see, I was telling you about what the observation does and doesn't do to try and preclude that question.
That's fine. That's fair enough.
Manage
so you don't want to. That's fine. But that's what the opposition is calling, and you don't want to meddle in that. Fair enough. Then we will wrap it up here. Katya, Andrusz, spokesperson for the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. Thank you very much for your time. Now, let me bring in Stefan Meister. He is with the German Council on Foreign Relations. Hello and welcome to the program. So, recent polling shows that a clear majority of Georgians want to join the European Union. So, why was that not reflected in the parliamentary elections, you think?
Because the current governing party, Georgian Dream Party, and its owner, Bidzina Ivanishvili, they don't want to join the European Union. And I think they made other topics a main issue of the election, and that was the war, Russia's war in Ukraine, and that if the opposition would win, Georgia would be dragged into this war. So I think it was about the security of the people. It was about relations with Russia, this election, and also about the EU. But I think the concern of the society is much more their own personal security and socioeconomic developments of the country.
Right. There seems to be such polar opposition, so to speak, happening in the country, isn't it? On the one hand, there seems to be quite a lot of people who want to be pro-EU, but the Georgian Dream Party seems to be pulling the country toward Moscow. Why the disconnect?
I don't think this is the main topic. It is a key topic for Georgia, definitely where it wants to develop. And I think if Georgian Dream really has won this election, I think it will bring Georgia away from the path towards the EU, and it will lose its orientation. And that means Russia will have more leverage, more leeway to impact on Georgia, and the country is becoming more authoritarian. But what we also see is a very vulnerable society, a society which can be manipulated also, and we have seen this with this election campaign through the Georgian Dream. We have seen that a lot of money has been spent also on voting, and I think in the end, again, it's a socioeconomic question which is crucial for the country, and neither the opposition nor the governing party, the current governing party, they have really addressed this topic enough, and have played this polarization. And I think the problem is opposition does not really offer an alternative. They are not seen really fundamentally different than the governing party, and that's why still a lot of people voted also for the Georgian Dream Party.
Interesting. Current President Salome Zourabichvili has attempted to rally the opposition against Georgian Dream and keep Georgia on course to join the EU. Do these results kill those plans?
No, I don't think so. I think I didn't say that they really won the election in an overall majority by over 50%, as we have seen it now. I think OSCE observers have shown that and not only OSCEs, also independent observers have shown that there was a huge scheme of rigging the elections, falsifying the election, manipulating the election. Polls have shown that Georgian Dream has only 35-40%. So they have rigged around 10 to 15% to get over the 50%. That means I think there is a kind of there will be a huge reaction from the opposition and from the organized civil society. I expect also mass demonstrations against this falsification and manipulation of the election. Just the way they have done it, I think, was quite smart, because it's not so easy really to show the details of this falsification.
Right. We'll keep following this. Only time will tell how things develop. Stefan Meister with the German Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you.
Thank you.